stole my seeds? By Joanne Timperley, illustrated by Sarah Lee Wills. This year, Mrs. Greenfingers had bought a packet of sunflower seeds. She was very excited to plant them and watch them grow. The packet said they could grow up to 3 meters tall. She carefully filled 6 small pots with potting compost and pressed it down with her fingers. She then used the end of the pencil to make a deep hole in the center of each pot, dropped a seed in each, covered the top with soil, gave them another quick press, and water. Job done. She stood back and admired her handiwork, and then went inside to make a cup of tea, very pleased with herself and excited to see her 6 sunflower seeds grow. The next morning, Mrs. Greenfingers got up and put the kettle on. She looked out her kitchen window and got a shock. Something or someone had dug up one of her sunflower seeds. There was soil on the patio, a gaping hole in the pot, and when she looked closely, an empty seed case was on the floor. "Oh no," thought Mrs. Greenfingers. "Who or what has taken my sunflower seed?" The very next morning, the same thing happened. Mrs. Greenfingers got up and went downstairs only to find that another seed pod had been disturbed. The soil was on the floor and the seed was gone. "Who is stealing my seeds?" thought Mrs. Greenfingers. "I must pay more attention." The same thing happened the next 3 mornings. Mrs. Greenfingers came downstairs only to find that another seed pod had been disturbed. The soil was on the floor and the seed was gone. With 5 seeds now gone, Mrs. Greenfingers only had 1 undisturbed seed pod left. She was very worried and really wanted to keep her last one safe. So she decided to sit in her conservatory all day to discover who or what was disturbing the seed pods and taking the seed. She got up very early the next morning, made a cup of tea, and went into her conservatory to watch the seed pod in her garden. Just as she sat down, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a very prickly little hedgehog scuttling behind her plants. "Is it the shy Mrs. Hedgehog?" she thought. But her last seed was still safe and still there undisturbed. She settled down to enjoy looking at her garden. Very soon, a blackbird with his shiny black feathers and bright yellow beak flew down and sat on the edge of the seed pod. He waited for a while, seemed to sense that Mrs. Greenfingers was watching, and flew away. Was it Mr. Blackbird who was stealing her seeds? How could he know there was a seed in her pot? Shortly after the blackbird flew away, a squirrel ran skillfully along the top of her fence like a gymnast, quickly danced across her lawn whilst checking constantly for danger, and was heading towards the last seed pod, but at that moment, Mrs. Greenfinger's phone rang, and she had to get up and answer it. The squirrel sensed the movement and scampered quickly away. It was Mrs. Greenfinger's friend Sue, checking on Mrs. Greenfinger's progress with the mystery. "A growing list of suspects, but no hard evidence," was Mrs. Greenfinger's response. "Slow progress," whilst watching, as always, the last remaining seed pot. Mrs. Greenfingers wondered whether the acrobatic squirrel was the secret thief of the seeds. Mrs. Greenfingers settled back down again and picked up a magazine. After not so very long, a cheeky robin flew down and, bold as brass, sat on the edge of the seed pot. Was it cheeky Mr. Robin Redbreast? Mrs. Greenfingers waited with bated breath. Would he try to steal the last seed? Was Mr. Robin Redbreast the cheeky seed snatcher? Was he looking for food for his children? It had now been 2 hours of watching. Mrs. Greenfingers was beginning to get a long list of suspects, but she had no evidence or proof of who was stealing her seeds. The wait continued. A large black and white magpie flew down onto the lawn and listened to see if she could hear any worms, and then strode confidently towards the last seed pod on the patio. Was clever Mrs. Magpie the one who knew there was a nutritious seed in the pod? Thought Mrs. Greenfingers. She waited. The magpie just flew away. At the end of the day, Mrs. Greenfingers was no nearer to learning who was the culprit of the crime. She had to keep her one last seed very safe. She moved the pot and carefully placed it on her little table at the bottom of the garden. Hopefully, it would be safe there, a little higher up and away from her patio. Success! After a few days, the first green shoot of the sunflower appeared, and Mrs. Greenfingers moved the pot to the sunniest part of the garden. Sunflowers love the sunshine. When the first 2 leaves appeared, Mrs. Greenfingers checked the bottom of the pot to see if the roots were showing. There was no sign of them. She had to be patient. Then another 2, and then another 2. Mrs. Greenfingers was very excited. She gave it a little bit of water every day. When the sunflower had 8 leaves, its roots appeared at the bottom of the pot, which meant it was ready to be repotted. Mrs. Greenfingers very carefully replanted the sunflower into a large pot, filled it with more soil, and gave it some water. Each day, Mrs. Greenfingers admired her sunflower as it grew and grew and grew. Mrs. Greenfingers could hardly believe her eyes. "It is like the plant in Jack and the Beanstalk," she thought. The sunflower soon became taller than Mrs. Greenfingers and was even taller than her garden wall. She wondered if it would ever stop growing, but it did, and to her amazement began to form a giant bud at the top of this giant plant. Mrs. Greenfingers was so delighted. A few days later, Mrs. Greenfingers caught a glimpse of yellow, then a bit more yellow, and then a lot more yellow. The bud exploded into a carnival of bright yellow sunshine. It was beautiful. Mrs. Greenfingers was tremendously proud of her giant sunflower. She felt like she had personally created something that was magically wonderful. How could something so big grow from one small seed? Mrs. Greenfingers was so happy. She made a cup of tea and sat in her conservatory admiring her beautiful sunflower as it turned its head to follow the sun as it moved across the garden. She reflected on her other seeds and wondered who had stolen them. The giant sunflower was spectacular, and all of Mrs. Greenfinger's friends came to admire it. But, like all good things in nature, it is only spectacular for a short period of time. The sunshine got less, and the sunflower's head dropped and began to dry out. Mrs. Greenfingers sat down in her conservatory with a cup of tea and thought how beautiful the sunflower had been. As she sat quietly, she saw the robin and the blackbird, the squirrels and the magpie hop, walk, and scamper underneath her sunflower and eat the seeds which had fallen from the sunflower head. As she watched, she was sure Mrs. Hedgehog would be around later to snuffle up some of her seeds too. She sat quietly and thought about how just one sunflower grown from one small sunflower seed has given so much pleasure to her and had dropped enough seeds for all her garden wildlife to enjoy, including lots for me to plant next year too, she thought. Here are some fun facts. Sunflowers. Each sunflower head can contain as many as 1,000 to 2,000 seeds. In 2014, Hans-Peter Schaefer grew the world's tallest sunflower, which reached a height of 9.17 meters. Wow! Robins! Both male and female robins have the characteristic red breast, with the female robin being slightly larger than the male. Robins are known for nesting in unusual places, including old teapots, jacket pockets, and on shelves in buildings. Robin eggs are blue. Blackbirds. Only male blackbirds are black, with a yellow bill and a yellow ring around the eye. Female blackbirds are similar size but are all brown in color. Blackbirds typically like to sing after rain. Squirrels. Squirrels are intelligent and can find food buried beneath up to a foot of snow. The hind legs of squirrels are double-jointed, which gives them their acrobatic skills and abilities. Hedgehogs. Hedgehogs have around 5,000 spines, each of which lasts about a year before a replacement grows. A baby hedgehog is called a hoglet. Seeds. Seeds come in all shapes and sizes and need a combination of light, oxygen, and moisture to grow. When a seed is planted, it first grows roots. Once these have become established, a small plant will begin to grow and push through the soil. This is called germination. Soil. There are billions of microorganisms in a handful of soil. It is actually alive. This living system provides all the nutrients for a plant to grow. All you need is to add water. Magpies. Magpies are very intelligent and can recognize their own image in a mirror. They are known to take food so they can eat it at a later date. Why don't you ask your parents or carers if they will help you plant some sunflower seeds of your own and see if you can grow a giant sunflower? The end. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please subscribe and come back again.